Resale or new construction? This is a really important question to ask yourself if you're thinking about buying a home. There are pros and cons to both, so let's talk about it. In case you're new here, my name is Carly, aka the Enchanted Agent with Realtor. I'm a Disney-loving Central Florida realtor, and over the past 2 years, my business has been about half resale and half new construction. So I'd like to think I have some good opinions on both options. Whether you're a first-time homebuyer or a seasoned pro, deciding between new construction and resale can be a tough one. So let's weigh some of the pros and drawbacks of both. The first, and in my opinion, most important thing to think about if you're considering new construction versus resale is what your timeline is. So let's talk about resale first. If you're buying a resale home, you generally can control or have a good idea of what the closing date will be, and most of the time you know the closing date while you're putting the offer in on the property. You can usually close within 30 days, sometimes a little bit longer or sometimes even a little bit shorter depending on your loan or if you're paying cash. So resale is a really great option for someone who has a really tight timeline. I'm going to be honest with you right now. If you're looking for a home in a rush and you need to be somewhere very quickly, new construction is not for you. When you finally find that new construction home of your dreams and you start talking to the builder about writing a contract up, they're usually not going to give you a solid date that the home will be completed. They'll use their best judgment and try to guesstimate the month that they think the home will be ready, but in my experience, 9 times out of 10, that date is completely wrong, and generally it's at least a few months later than they promised. That is why if you're considering new construction, it is crucial that you are flexible with your move-in date and that you're open to the fact that it might take longer than you were expecting. Especially if you're fully customizing a home, you can expect for the build times to be even longer. For example, my last 2 new construction transactions, the first one took 14 months to build, and the second one hasn't even closed yet, and it's looking that it's going to be about 15 months to close. So that's a pretty long time to wait for your home, so you really have to be okay with that. Now, there are some homes that builders sell called spec homes where the builder decides all of the finishes prior to even putting it available to buy. So in those situations, the builder usually has more control over how long it will take. And some of those homes can be done in as little as 4 to 6 months. Usually those ones are a little bit more on target because they have everything ordered already. The second thing that I want to talk about new construction versus resale is your financing. If you are using a loan to purchase a home and you're using it for new construction, you kind of have to think way ahead. So as I mentioned before, my last 2 new construction homes took over a year to build. So imagine how different the interest rates were when they initially signed their contract to when they closed. You really have to work with a lender who knows what they're doing so you can discuss locking a rate and just kind of seeing what's going on with the market. Another thing in that time frame that you have to consider is just life changes in general. You could unfortunately lose your job. You could have to spend a portion of your savings on some other emergency that was supposed to go towards that home. So you really have to plan for the future when you're building a new construction home because unfortunately life happens and these things change. And guess what? If you sign a contract with a builder, a lot of times their contract will not allow you to get your deposit money back if something like that happens. So just make sure you're reading your contracts and fully understanding what you're getting into with new construction. Or that's another reason why it's really important to hire a realtor who knows what they're doing with new construction, because there's a lot of idiosyncrasies that you have to deal with. Now, as far as resale goes with mortgages, it's much easier to control what's going on because, again, when you're putting that offer in, you're determining the closing date, and for the most part, it stays that way. So you can lock your rate right away, and you never have any question when closing day comes what your interest rate's going to be. Obviously, since it's a shorter timeline as well of like 30 to 45 days versus a year and a half, hopefully nothing crazy happens in your life between that time and closing. So that's just another thing to think about with pro and con with new construction versus resale. Everybody wants to build a new construction home because then they can select what the house looks like inside, right? Sometimes, but sometimes not. A lot of builders do semi-custom homes, especially in Central Florida. So you're not building a house exactly to your specs. You might buy a new construction home that's customizable, but the builder only has a couple different packages for you to choose from. This is still a great way to allow you to pick and choose kind of what you want your house to look like, but sometimes you're not able to pick everything. Obviously, with resale, you're taking what you're looking at. There's no upgrades, there's no changes in the process. But in my opinion, I think it's easier for you to update a resale home than a new construction home, and here's why. If you're moving into a home with all brand new flooring and walls and things like that, personally, I would kind of feel bad tearing out that brand new flooring and putting different new flooring in versus if I bought a resale home and the flooring was old and grungy anyway, I personally wouldn't feel as bad customizing it to my liking. So that's another thing to weigh out. It might be easier for you to fully customize a home and cheaper to purchase resale versus new construction. Kind of along the topic of customization as well, let's talk about pricing of finishes in new construction versus resale. So obviously, when you're buying a new construction home, sometimes you can upgrade the flooring, you can upgrade the hardware on the kitchen, all of these things. But a lot of times there is more attached to those prices. They're a little bit higher because they're charging you for the convenience of doing all of that for you before you move in. So you may end up spending more money on the exact same door handles on the new construction than you would in resale. So I always like to tell people, if you want to do new construction, don't upgrade everything because it could be cheaper to do it by yourself afterwards and you'll end up saving a bunch of money. Whereas, again, resale, if you're sourcing all of these upgrades yourself, you can search for the best deal and you can save a lot of money that way as well. And even do it yourself instead of paying labor of new construction to complete these projects. Something you may not know about new construction homes, and that actually falls into a pro of new construction, is most builders include some kind of warranty with your home. Generally, they're for a year or longer, and they cover any sort of issues you might have with the home during that first year of ownership. Do you notice a blemish on the wall, a chip in the granite, things like that? Usually the builder will come back and fix those things within the first year of home ownership. So that's definitely a perk, whereas resale, you don't have that benefit. The day you move into that house, it is on you to make any repairs, and if you notice something is wrong with the house after you move in, for the most part, unfortunately, that's just your burden to bear at that point. Now, I will say with resale, usually if the home's been lived in for a few years already, a lot of the kinks are worked out already. Whereas new construction, sometimes you might have electrical issues, things like that, because obviously the people building the homes are human and things get messed up sometimes. So usually they'll come back and fix them, but you might have to deal with putting in a trouble ticket, waiting a week for them to get the subcontractors back out and things like that. Whereas resale, it's already worked out. Usually the person that lived there before has hopefully dealt with all of the little weird things that are happening in the house. Do you like living in a lush neighborhood with lots of shade? Well, if you're buying new construction, you're not going to have that mature landscaping that you might see in a neighborhood that's been established. And I notice this a lot when I'm taking buyers out to new construction because they're like, there is no shade on this sidewalk. It is so hot. And it's because the trees haven't had a chance to mature yet. So it's not providing any shade compared to a neighborhood that's been around for 30 years that has some really nice and lush trees. All right, let's flip back to another pro of new construction versus resale. And this is all about making friends. Obviously, when you move into a new neighborhood, you want to make friends with your neighbors, unless you're grouchy like me and just don't want to talk to anyone. But, that's besides the point. So one of the benefits of building a new home is generally at least everyone on your street is usually closing around the same time that you are. So everyone is brand new to the neighborhood at the same time. This kind of builds a sense of community and everyone's looking to meet each other. So it's a really good way to build a community together. You can be the first one in, you can join the HOA, you can make friends, things like that. Whereas resale, you might be moving in between two neighbors who have both lived there for 15 years. A little bit harder to crack into the neighborhood and make friends. Definitely not impossible, but it might be a little bit easier with new construction because everyone is new. All right, and last but not least, let's talk about pricing because let's be real, the money is the most important part out of all of this. So first, let's talk about negotiating resale versus new construction. Resale homes, you can negotiate the price, obviously depending on the market. Right now in Central Florida, we are still seeing some negotiations happening for buyers, so that is amazing. New construction's a little bit different. Generally, instead of negotiating on price, they may offer some incentives up front. However, they usually will not negotiate on the price. Not saying it's impossible or unheard of, but usually builders are pretty steadfast on keeping the price that they have listed at what you're paying. Sometimes they'll offer incentives such as covering a certain amount of closing costs or to buy down your interest rate. And again, this is all market specific. But like I said, the price that's listed for the home for new construction is generally the price that you're going to end up paying. Now, what tends to be more expensive, resale or new construction? In the past, new construction has always kind of led in the price point for obvious reasons. It's brand new, everyone wants new. We have been seeing some trends just overall in the United States of new construction prices kind of balancing out, and I'll tell you why. So obviously during 2020, 2021, interest rates were super low, and people that bought during that time, their mortgage payments are way lower than most people. So they're not ready to let go of those homes and put them up for sale even if they want to move. So unfortunately, inventory for resale homes is starting to become lower and lower, thus making it more competitive to buy. Whereas the builders and the developers are kind of noticing this trend. They're kind of saying, hey, let's incentivize these people that can't get into resale right now and maybe offer some better incentives, lower our prices a little bit to attract people to our homes instead of resale. So in that case, you might start seeing the price of new construction kind of leveling out a little bit with resale. But a good rule of thumb is generally that new construction is going to be at least a little bit more than resale, but you never know. We'll see what the future holds. I could literally go on and on forever about this topic, but at this point, I'm sure you've got enough information, so I'm going to share one last nugget with you. So something else to consider between resale and new construction is your appliances. Things like your refrigerator, your stove, your air conditioner, even your roof, because if you're buying resale, these items could be older and you might have to replace them sooner. So that'll cost you in the long run, and that can add up very quickly. Whereas new construction, you know all of those items are brand new and you're not gonna have to replace them for quite some time. So it's something to consider when you're looking in the same price range for new construction versus resale, to remember that sooner down the road, you might have to replace some of those items and you're gonna need to start saving money immediately for that. I hope you learned a lot from this video, and like I said, I do a lot of new construction and a lot of resale, and I have a lot to say. So if you have any other questions about new construction versus resale, or just real estate in general, I'm more than happy to chat about anything you might want to know. My contact info is at the end of this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this.